years, scratch that, centuries, the idea of spontaneous human combustion has instilled both interest and fear into the mind of onlookers, and how could you blame them? The what-if factor is strong with this one. The mere idea is baffling in its own right. I'm sure we've all enjoyed a stiff drink of whiskey. Man, does that burn. Or at least some awful heartburn, following a binge of food that tastes so good but bears harsh consequences. Now times that by 1,000, and that might just scrape the surface of the horrible nightmare that is spontaneous human combustion. So what even is it exactly? Spontaneous human combustion is the alleged medical phenomenon that sees the human body self-destruct by internal fire. Downright terrifying and insane, am I right? The body is guilty of a variety of strangeness, but is this too far? The populace remains divided. Paranormal enthusiasts cling to the idea as a perfect example, as a baseline to other otherworldly fringe phenomenon that span far past our agreeable perception of normalcy, while scientists argue a simple explanation in the Wick effect to quell the hype, yet finding shortcomings in the explanation to completely debunk the obscenity. Let's take a deeper dive. With the idea of spontaneous human combustion still up for debate, let me present the evidence, put the case on trial, and you be the judge. Spontaneous human combustion, as defined by Nicholas Kluger and Vervi Kuljonen in the journal article Spontaneous Human Combustion in the Light of the 21st Century, found on the National Library of Medicine's website, refers to a situation when a human body is found with significant portions of the middle parts of the body reduced to ashes, much less damage to the head and extremities, and minimal damage to the direct surroundings of the body. Typically, no observable source of ignition is found in the vicinity of the victim, and a bad-smelling, oily substance is noted. Although it has been annotated constantly throughout history, pop culture has helped revive the medical oddity, with one specific author accredited with helping bring back spontaneous human combustion into the limelight. Charles Dickens. Yes, A Christmas Carol Charles Dickens is accredited as bringing the idea back into the minds of the public with his 1853 novel, Bleak House. Within its pages, Dickens uses this strange medical phenomena to take care of one of his characters, described as an old sleazy alcoholic. Alcoholism being a constant characteristic in victims of spontaneous human combustion, Mr. Crook reducing him to a mere heap of ashes upon the floor and a dark greasy coating on the walls and ceiling. Dickens' choice of death was met with much scrutiny by the public, who perceived the idea as pure lunacy. This is quite the reaction, considering the public, who now ridiculed him, gawked at his work 10 years prior, having no reason to fret at the tale of Ebenezer Scrooge
Humbug.
being visited by not one, not two, not even three, but 4 ghostly visitors. Dickens defended his choice of death relentlessly, clinging to his apparent deep historical research, being able to cite dozens of famous cases, well verified by doctors' judgment of the times, leaving his naysayers with this final verdict: I shall not abandon the facts until there has been a considerable spontaneous combustion of the testimony of which human occurrences are usually received. Dickens does not stand alone in his pop culture references with his use of spontaneous human combustion. Others have found both traditional and other interesting ways to adopt the concept into their work, blending the lines of potential fact and fiction. Like Dickens, authors Herman Melville and Nikolai Gogol have used both spontaneous human combustion in a traditional sense in their respective works, Redburn, 1849, and Dead Souls, 1842. More modern adaptations have seen a shift in the strange medical happenings lethal factor. Superhero Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch from the Fantastic Four series, embraces the concept of spontaneous human combustion, putting a new twist upon the idea, using this unfortunate circumstance as a positive claim for a unique superpower. Returning to its traditional sense, author Joe Hill takes the phenomenon to a new extreme height, letting us know that if one case of spontaneous human combustion is terrifying, try a world infected by the idea. Within Hill's novel, The Fireman, spontaneous human combustion fills the void for an apocalyptic fate. Characters within the book are infected by a horrible plague virus called Dragon Scale, which reacts to a person's stress level. I know people who wouldn't even last moments, let alone days. When an infected person becomes too anxious and or overwhelmed, they erupt with a fire until they settle into an ashy death. Can an inescapable death become any more terrifying than this? Let's talk about some alleged cases. The case of Dr. Irving Bentley actually happened in my hometown. Over the past 300 years, there have been more than 200 reported cases of alleged spontaneous human combustion. If we look back even further to medieval literature, we find what is often claimed as the first account of a recorded case of spontaneous human combustion, Polonus Vorstus. Henceforth, since Vorstus, each case has shared the following characteristics as originally described in the book Medical Jurisprudence, 1821, that was revisited when cited by L.A. Perry in 1938 in the British Medical Journal. Victims are chronic alcoholics, usually elderly females. Their bodies had burned spontaneously, their hands and feet usually fell off, the fire caused little damage to the surrounding areas, the combustion of their bodies left a residue of greasy and fetid ashes as well as a horrid smell. Let's take a deeper dive and look at some of the most prominent cases over the years, starting with Vorstus. Polonus Vorstus is widely referred to as Subject Zero in this phenomenon, with his best known recording occurring almost 200 years after the said event. But hey, some have put their faith into far less in this wild game of historic telephone we play. Vorstus's 1470 case is widely known for its 1641 recording in Danish physician Thomas Bartholin's book Historiarum Anatomicorum Rariorum, which was a strange collection of medical phenomena. In his narrative, he explains that Vorstus was an Italian knight living in Milan, Italy in 1470 when his case of spontaneous human combustion took place following a night of drinking. Before his untimely demise, he was drinking large amounts of wine, which was not out of the ordinary for him. Sometime during his consumption, but before his combustion, he felt a strong fiery pain begin to grow in his chest, throwing him into a coughing fit. His cough erupted into what was described as a vomit of flames that eventually consumed his entire body into a burst of fire. If this doesn't scream foul play, a hex, and an evil court wizard, I don't know what else does. However, the fact that this strange medical experience became an historic occurrence causes us all to wonder what exactly our bodies are capable of. If we flash forward to the 18th century, we discovered the 1725 case of Nicole Millet, recorded by French author Jonas Dupont in his 1763 De Cridis Corporis Humani Spontaneis, his collection of cases and studies on the subject of spontaneous human combustion. What is significant about this case is the theory was used as a defense and alongside a testimony helped to prove her husband's innocence. Her case goes like this. Millet's husband, an innkeeper, was awoken one night to the smell of smoke. When he rushed to the source, he found his wife Nicole reduced to ash, and oddly enough, the straw bed which she was laying upon in the surrounding area remained unscathed. All that remained of Millet was her skull and some bones from her lower back and legs. A constant characteristic among cases, she was allegedly an alcoholic. As if her death wasn't traumatizing enough, her husband would stand trial for murder and was initially found guilty. With much ambition, he fought the verdict, claiming the death was caused by spontaneous human combustion, which was backed by the testimony of surgeon Dr. Claude Nicolas Lacat, who had been staying at the inn the same night, leading to Mr. Millet being acquitted. At the later end of the 19th century, we find the case of Matilda Rooney. Rooney's case occurred on Christmas Eve, 1885, in the small farming town of Seneca, Illinois. Just prior to her event, the Rooneys and a farmhand shared a pleasant evening of relaxation, whiskey drinking, and friendship to bring in the holiday. Sometime after the farmhand had parted for the evening and Mr. Rooney had settled in for the night, Mrs. Rooney spontaneously combusted while sitting alone in the kitchen. The fire was overwhelming, consuming all of her body, only leaving behind a few bone fragments, all while the fire stayed confined to her body, leaving the rest of the room untouched. Unfortunately, the deathly occurrence didn't end there. Her husband, who rested in another room in the house, succumbed to suffocation from fumes of his deceased wife's body. The 1966 case of Dr. Irving Bentley is the catalyst for my interest in spontaneous human combustion. Growing up in Coudersport, PA, more than 30 years after the event, I constantly heard whispering debates about the true possibilities of Dr. Irving Bentley's death, convincing me that even almost 500 years after Polonus Vorstus, with all the advancements in medical discoveries, we still wonder about the true possibilities of the human body, caught in the fringe between fact and fiction. Dr. Irving Bentley was a family doctor who served the Coudersport area between 1925 and 1953. After his retirement, he lived a typical quiet small-town life in his two-story home on North Main Street. Since the gas meter for his home was located in his basement, there was a spoken agreement with North Penn Gas Company that they were allowed to enter his home when needed for a meter reading. This was all fine and dandy until one fateful morning on December 5th, 1966. On the morning of December 5th, Don Gosnell, like any time before, let himself into Dr. Bentley's home around 9 a.m. for his usual meter reading. Upon reaching the basement, he was overwhelmed by what he described as a sickly Swedish smell. Following his nose, it led him to an ominous pile of ashes in the middle of the floor. Tracing the trickling ashes from above, his eyes landed on a large hole in the ceiling, encircled by glowing embers. Gosnell rushed to the room he knew as the bathroom, shouting out Dr. Bentley's name in his pursuit, hoping for a response that unfortunately never came. When he arrived, so did the hideous truth. Dr. Bentley had been reduced to ash, leaving behind only his charred lower leg and a slippered foot. Oddly enough, his walker that he used to get to his master bathroom remained unscathed, tipped over next to a large hole burnt into the floor. Although the paint on the wall was charred black, it never blistered. All involved with the case believed that Dr. Bentley, being a smoker, may have caused the fire, but all were flustered at the fact that his walker remained unscathed, in a fire hot enough to reduce Dr. Bentley to mere ash. After his discovery, Gosnell ran a block to the North Penn Gas Company office, where the local volunteer fire department, the Potter County Deputy Coroner John Deck, and local mortician Richard Lendholm were all contacted and summoned. Once the smoke had settled, the deputy coroner delivered the following statement. "Looks like Doc Bentley was smoking his pipe. The pipe toppled over and spilled over the tobacco, and in the meantime, he fell asleep. When he woke up, he was on fire because some of the flannel nightshirt pieces fell on the floor as he went to the bathroom." Ultimately, though still highly debated, Dr. Bentley's death did not get labeled as a case of spontaneous human combustion, rather, the verdict of accidental death. Let's talk about some theories. How do scientists try to make sense of all the talk of this outlandish death? Well, by the way of the Wick effect theory. This theory is the highest regarded and most commonly approved amongst the science community. The basis of the idea is that the human body essentially acts like a candle, with its body fats and oils acting as the candle's wick. The body's oils are absorbed in the victim's clothing and hair. Then by way of an ignition source, as simple as a cigarette, the individual is set ablaze. Believers of this theory also argue that because the fire being so concentrated to the human body, it explains itself for the lack of additional fire damage to the room in which it occurs. Author and biology professor Brian J. Ford adds this to the argument. When a person is ill, they sometimes naturally produce traces of acetone in the body, and acetone is highly flammable. I experimented with the scale model humans using pig flesh that has been marinated in acetone. They burn like incendiary bombs. Alcoholism can cause people to produce acetone, as can many diseases. My conclusion is that unwell individuals produce high levels of acetone, which accumulate in fatty tissue and can be ignited, perhaps by a static spark or a cigarette. This ties in well to the previously conceived notion mentioning similar characteristics among alleged cases, focusing on the alcoholic aspect. Whiskey burns, but not quite like this. Those who oppose the wick effect theory find credence in their argument for the possibility of spontaneous human combustion by claiming the blatantly obvious. They argue that the human body must achieve a temperature of 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit to be reduced to mere ash, as seen in almost every case. To put this into perspective, the cremation of the human body happens between the temperatures of 1400 and 1800 degrees Fahrenheit. Moreover, they claim that the wick effect theory does not provide enough proof in its argument as to why the fire stays contained to the victim, while many house fires that result in total loss structural damage start from fires much smaller than the volume of a human body, and from there spread to consume the entire home. So what do you think? Is this just another one of the universe's greatest mysteries, or is evidence from each alleged case being embarrassingly omitted? Even if the source of ignition and fuel can be poorly explained, what do you make of the well-contained fire that seems to only feed upon its victim? Will we ever really know the truth, or will it forever remain one of the world's strangest medical phenomenons, lost among the annals of history?